Have you ever asked yourself why being a salon owner is so hard? The dream of owning your own salon has sometimes felt like a nightmare. And there have been times you've realized that you were making more money when you were working as a stylist or an esthetician before owning the salon and didn't have all the headaches to deal with. If any of this is resonating with you, or if you're considering opening your own salon, today's episode is for you. Because many salon owners spend years building a successful career behind the chair, only to discover that owning a salon requires an entirely different version of themselves. Welcome to the Salon Scoop, the podcast that helps salon owners and salon professionals grow their business, boost their brand, and stay inspired. From salon marketing and social media to leadership and growth, we uncover the strategies and stories that move the industry forward. If you love learning, growing, and are serious about leveling up your salon business and brand, you've just found your new go-to podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Salon Scoop, everyone. Today we're diving into a topic that almost every salon owner experiences, but very few people talk about openly. It's that transition from being a stylist or an esthetician working sort of behind the chair to becoming a true business owner. It's glorified in our industry, yet there's a real struggle within that goes on. For many of us, opening a salon feels like the natural next step in our careers. But what often catches owners by surprise is that the biggest challenge isn't finding clients, isn't managing finances or building a team. It's actually letting go of the identity that got them there in the first place. Joining me today is salon owner Lyndsay Maderis, owner of 2 salon locations called Thairapy in the Pacific Northwest, who has lived through this journey firsthand. Together in today's episode, we're going to explore the mindset shifts, the lessons learned, and some of the realities that come from moving behind the chair to behind the brand. Right, so whether you're thinking about opening a salon, you've recently become an owner, or you've been in business for years and you just feel like you maybe hit a ceiling, this conversation should give you a lot to think about. Lyndsay, I want to start off by just saying thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited to get into this conversation and hear your perspective on the journey that you've experienced.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is definitely the thing everyone needs to know before they open their own spot.
Yeah, or the ones who are already there and struggling through it. Well, hopefully, we can guide them through with some unlocks maybe to
Yes.
help them out. So before we get into some of the the meat behind the bones here, I want to ask a bit of the top line of your journey so that our listeners out there can just get to know how you started in the industry, in what capacity, were you hair, aesthetics, how long, when you made the leap to salon ownership, some of that stuff. If you can give us a bit of your background, please.
Yeah, I actually was in a completely different career field. I was in medical sales and worked in the OR and previously done pharmaceutical sales. And so it was a very different world and I wanted to get out of it. And I remember doing makeup in college and just making women feel good was just the best feeling. And I had a crazy idea to go to hair school. So at 33, which felt very old at the time, I snuck off to beauty school and grinded for 6 months and got my hair degree.
Wow.
And then, jumped into it head first.
And so you started off in a salon. Give us a bit of your salon journey at that point. Were you a commission salon? Where did you end up? How long were you working as a stylist before you eventually decided to open your own salon?
Yes, so I did my beauty school and then immediately locked in an apprenticeship, which I had agreed to do for a year. So I went from making 6 figures to sweeping hair for $10 an hour. It was such a journey, but it was so fun. And so I was an assistant and I did commission hair in my off hours of being an assistant. And I did that for about a year. And then after I had done my year, I went off on commission on my own.
Fair enough. And how long did you work as a stylist before deciding to open your own salon?
Yeah, I did commission for a bit at the salon I apprenticed at, and then I went off and rented a chair on my own at another salon for about a year. And at that point, I really had an affinity for hair extensions, and I was kind of new to bringing it to the market. And this is like 2013, 14. And with the advent of Instagram, I was posting everything at kind of that beginning crux of the social media influence world with hair. And I had just an amazing demand coming out the door. I'd worked so much that I had blown out my wrist doing extensions 6 days a week and had to get surgery. And it just came to this point where I realized I was turning away business and I really needed to go through with this lofty idea I'd always had of having a salon. So I was kind of forced into it with just some personal stuff going on. It was just the right time. So I opened up Therapy, the first shop,
In what year was that?
2016. Sorry, 10
2016.
years.
Okay, wow. Congratulations on that. And then how long was it before you opened the second location?
I opened that one in 2022. So 6 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what are the sort of approximate sizes just in terms of number of employees to give people a sense of sort of what we're speaking to here?
Yeah, so we are color and extension services, just hair, no aesthetics.
Yeah.
And the first spot I opened was just 2 chairs, quickly became 3 chairs. And then I grew out of that in 3 or 4 months, and we needed to get another spot. So I got 1,000 square feet in the heart of Portland and the Pearl District. And we were in 1,000 square feet with 6 chairs and packed to the brim. And then that is when I was like, I either need to get a larger space or I wanted to attract the suburban women that don't want to go to the city.
Hmm.
And I had exited the city and lived out, in the suburban life. And I realized there's a lot of women who want luxe hair, but they don't want to go to the city. So I opened up like more of like a strip mall, suburban free parking vibe in Vancouver, Washington. And that one is about 1,200 square feet and 5 chairs. And I
Okay.
have everyone's on commission, and so I have right now about 15 stylist employees, but we're probably only at about 50% capacity with our recent expansion.
Got it. Okay, great. That's a good way to sort of summarize your journey. What we're going to focus on, obviously, is kind of that transition from deciding you had this dream of opening a salon and kind of going through that, and the struggles, the challenges, the obstacles, and how you have been able to overcome those to essentially grow a successful business to the point of opening a second location, and being a bit of a powerhouse in the Pacific Northwest. So let's start off with this. If you had to summarize in one sentence, just super briefly, why the transition from stylist to owner is so hard for most people, how would you break that down into a simple sentence?
I think the hardest part isn't opening the salon. It's really becoming the person that you have to be for your salon, for your team, for your people. That's something they don't tell you about.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. We're gonna delve into that certainly a lot deeper. Let's. I want to focus on three things, Lyndsay, uh, that you didn't realize, that you didn't know when you first made that transition. So, what were maybe the top three things that you had just no clue about when you made the transition, that you wish you had known before doing it? These blind spots, let's say, that you faced along the road.
Yeah, I mean, number one, being great at hair doesn't mean that you're prepared in any way to run a full salon. You need leadership, systems, you've got to understand finances and hiring and marketing and how to create an awesome culture. And it's not just like paying rent somewhere and picking a cute playlist. I think, okay, three things. So I think so people don't always want what you want for them, right? Like no one's ever going to care the way you do about your salon. And letting go of that and understanding that like it, it's not personal.
Mm.
Um, I would say a third thing would be delegating. I learning that like, okay, this ties back into like, okay, it's you, you create this business off yourself, but you almost become your own bottleneck, right? If you're the main person everyone's trying to see, or you're the one person who does all the things for the salon logistically, it there's only so much of you in a day. And so really learning to let go of that control and creating opportunities for other people, I think is a huge thing that I had to learn.
Mm. And I'm sure many people do. I think that's common in almost all entrepreneurial businesses. When we're starting off, originally we're just on our own, and as we grow slowly but surely, we're just used to doing everything on our own, and it's harder to have that mindset of passing things off and delegating. And there's this feeling that, well, nobody can do it as well as I can, and it takes a lot, to kind of get past our own ego on some of those things. And
Yes.
definitely need to delve into how you overcame some of these. It's clearly there's a bit of an identity shift that needs to take place when you are
Mhm.
transitioning from being a stylist or an esthetician, where you just have your clients to sort of deal with. And you mentioned it yourself at the outset, as in that one sentence, is you have to recognize that your role, right, is very different now, in terms of what the expectations are as a leader. I'd love to
Mhm.
get your input on each one of these sort of three shifts that I'm going to bring to your attention for our listeners. I want to know what it was like for you, what the main challenges were, and maybe what helped you get through it successfully. So the first shift I'm going to talk about is the shift from being an artist, right, focused on your craft, and shifting to becoming a leader who's supposed to be focused on their team. So what were the challenges for you in that regard, and what were maybe some of the unlocks that you discovered, and best practices that you would recommend to people through your learnings?
Yeah, I think when you're an artist, you have immediate results, right? Your client sits in your chair, you give them their beautiful hair goals, and it's just this immediate success. You're done. That does not happen when you're running a business. Like it takes it's a slow process to feel. I don't even know if you ever actually feel successful, but you don't have that immediate result in 2 to 6 hours, right? So I think that's you have to find the little wins where they are and really cherish them. And like you said, letting go of being kind of that star player and becoming back behind the scenes more and being a coach and leading the team, is just so much more meaningful and fruitful in the long run.
Is that something that you struggled with at first, kind of, again, sort of making that transition? Because that is very typical. The salon owner is the busiest stylist in the new salon,
Yes.
and they are the star performer, and most of the revenue of the salon business is being generated by the salon owner. And it can be very difficult to transition to thinking, no, I have to be a leader who's supposed to be focused on the team and growing the team. Is that something you struggled with, and how did you push yourself past that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning you need to be the star player. That's the foundation bringing everyone in, right? That's okay. But the goal, you got to know what is your end game. Do you want it to be the Lindsay show forever? Or do you want it to be a brand like Therapy where you can walk away from it and it's a business taking care of itself without you as the brand, right? And so finding that, I'm sure it's different for everyone when they connect to that, if that is their goal. And that was my goal. And so I found, as you raise people up and they be the star, like every person I train, I tell them I want them to be better than I am. I'm giving you all I've got. You should take that and be even better. And so that mindset has really helped. And then I just see them all as little extensions of me. So I think you're shifting where your ego lies within.
Hmm. Yeah, which can be tricky for sure, but I think that's the unlock right there, is getting out of our own ego and
Yes.
recognizing what's best for the business. And the only way that the business can be successful is if you have an entire team that's thriving. And the only way that you're going to have an entire team that's thriving is if you put energy onto building that team and coaching that team,
Yes.
training that team. And that again is that mindset shift. All right, let's talk about a second critical shift that happens during these transitions. And I'd like to know what it was like for you, again, just from being an employee when you
Mhm.
were a commission-based stylist to all of a sudden becoming an employer, right? Where you are responsible. And we're not talking about the leadership and the coaching aspects, but just like the operational aspects of being an employer versus an employee. What was that shift like for you? What were some of the challenges, and what are some key best practices that you can share from your journey with others?
I think I was lucky as an apprentice with an owner and then renting booth rental too. I didn't come from a huge background of hair, but I got really great exposure to what owners treated their employees like, good and bad. So that helped me with a bit of the foundation. But when you go from being the employee to the employer, there is now all the weight of the world. Like, you are responsible for feeding these families that work for you. And that is a wild thing to take on yourself. And I don't think anyone can really prepare you for that concept of it. And, I take great pride in it, but it's something, you have to take seriously. Like, these people are relying on you now for their paycheck.
How do you deal with that pressure?
You just tuck it away. um, I think you fight for everything that your team needs. I think you use it to fuel you, right? When you're tired and you don't want to do it anymore, or you don't want to do that new procedure or system you need to build to make it better for your team, remembering that at the core of it, these people are counting on you in a way that when you're on your own, it's just you at the end of the day. And now it's not. So I think it's great to use it to fuel your energy when you're down. And, that was just a huge shift, which makes you then have to delegate better and make your processes better. And it all kind of ties back to that.
Hmm. How do you deal with kind of staying on this, because as a business owner, and this not just for salon owners, this is across the board, especially in the entrepreneurial world, there's a lot of difficult times. And there are times where as a salon owner you might be thinking, maybe I just made a huge mistake, like I don't know if I can continue on this. The pressure is real, and you're feeling the pressures not just from the business, you're feeling the pressures from your family. And there could be just other things going on in your personal life that are impacting your ability to show up in your full self. And there's probably times that you're thinking of throwing in the towel, but then coming back to what you've just been talking about, Lyndsay, is this feeling of all these employees, they are counting on me. But that can add additional stress to the whole situation. And sometimes maybe you don't feel like you have an outlet. Like, what is the outlet? Because everybody goes through those feelings. How do you will need to maintain a sense of positivity with the team. You don't want them to be feeling all of a sudden worried. I always say one of the key roles of a leader is to make sure that the employees do not have a sense of fear, right? You want to eliminate fear from the employees, fear for their jobs, fear that the business is going under. Your job as a leader, as an owner, is to dispel that. I'm sure you went through a lot of
We went
difficult.
through COVID.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Difficult periods. Like, how do you manage? What's the outlet? How do you deal with that as a salon owner? Um, what have some of
I,
your tips been?
I think for the first and most important thing for any entrepreneur is to understand and believe in my soul that nothing is a failure. It's not a word in my vocabulary. We're learning, we're always learning, but nothing is a failure. I'm not afraid of failing because I'm not going to. I'm going to learn a lot. And it's not always going to be fun, but I'm not a failure, right? So if you have that as your base point, I think that really helps set that foundation so that it's okay. You're going to mess up. You might take a turn you shouldn't have turned, and then you go back the other way. So I think it's really important to have your core set. And then for me, surrounding myself with other like-minded entrepreneurs, I've best friended people who have med spas or dental practices that are in it too, because you you can't relate to the people who haven't owned their own business. And it is this level of stress you described that you don't want to put on your team. You want them to feel safe at work and not scared. And so you have to find a place where you can discuss and commiserate a bit, but also troubleshoot with. So having a good network outside of that that you can really trust has been paramount for me.
Hmm. Those are two really great pieces of advice that I think everybody can take away from there. I love that. Okay, let's talk about the third shift that happens for everybody going through this transition from a service provider into a salon ownership standpoint. You mentioned it earlier, the whole delegation. So it's that shift from being a
Yeah.
doer, right? Someone who's used to doing everything to all of a sudden becoming a delegator and trying to avoid the temptation to do everything yourself. Share with us some of your experience, maybe some examples that you went through, the challenges and how you overcame it in a way that people can learn from.
I think, for me, I started and grew. I didn't just buy a 40 chair salon. I started from scratch, which was me and an assistant, and then a couple commission people, and a renter, which we could dive into that another time of why I changed those models. But at some point, you need help. Like you need front desk to add if you didn't have front desk. You need marketing help and social media. And so it becomes like I had said earlier, if you don't get the help, you just drown. And then you can't do it all and you want to burn it all down. And you can't do that because you have employees, right? So um, I think delegation just becomes a must. Whether you like it or not, you have to cross that bridge. And learning to allow people to mess up. They are not you. And in my case, they're better than me. Like, I have a horrible Yelp review because I got impatient on a phone call. I'm not good on the phone. I should not do that job. So once you realize that there's people who do a much better job at you than you, and which will take your business so much further, but you have to get to that mentality, right? And you have to be okay with them messing it up. They're going to mess it up. You mess it up too. And like, I don't know, they'll they'll get there and you just have to cross that bridge. And I think for the person starting out, I know it's really overwhelming, but I like to ask business owners like what was the first thing they took off their plate? And everyone has a different thing, but I find if you get your weakness off first, so like maybe it's bookkeeping, you hire a bookkeeper or you hire a new front desk person or whatever that one thing that's extra challenge, start with that first. And then you'll see your business will grow more and that will leave more room that you can delegate and off more tasks.
Hmm. I like that. So rather than trying to struggle through your weaknesses, you're best to find somebody who has a little bit more expertise in that area that will be much more efficient at doing it so that you can
Yes.
spend your time on the things that you're really good at.
Right, correct. And then because you're not tackling everything and doing it all bare minimum, you now have somebody excelling at one thing that allows you to then do better at the things that you're still doing, right? And I think that is a scary part of business because that's the growth part, right? When you're bringing in somebody else to do a task for you, um, it's scary. And sometimes it's scary, I feel like, in a financial realm, right? Because if someone's doing it for you, you're having to pay them to do that.
Well,
And
I want to delve into that because that's the biggest challenge. Typically, when you're first getting started, you feel like you're really strapped financially, and you
Mhm.
don't feel like you can afford to pay someone to do your bookkeeping or pay someone to do the front desk or pay someone to do some of your marketing. And as a result, you try to I'm going to say cheap out by doing it
Yeah.
all yourself. Uh, why or how do you kind of push past um, that fear of spending the money on those things?
Well, if you're already here and you're in this mess you put yourself in as an entrepreneur, you I think you have to be okay with some risk, right? And so in my head, I'm like, you have to spend money to make money. So, but I think is when you're at that critical mass moment where everything's like kind of falling apart, I think that is almost the best part of the business because that means you've grown so much that you can't do it all. You can't be the janitor and front desk and do the books. It's starting to fall apart, which some people I think that's when they lose it and this isn't for them, but I try when I'm talking to people to be like, that's the point that's exciting because this is your breaking point where you have to jump off the cliff, throw a little bit of money at somebody who can take something off your plate, and then you get back until you hit the next critical moment where you have to offload something else again. And if you see that part as an opportunity and like trust what I'm saying, just trust the fall, spend the money, it'll come back tenfold.
Mm. Now, what are some of the things that, as a salon owner, you should not delegate? Because sometimes the salon owner says, I just don't like this, or I'm not good, so I'm just going to delegate this. But there's certain things that, as the owner of the business, you need to stay on top of and stay connected to, right? Is there anything that you would recommend not to delegate because it's just important as a salon owner to be managing it?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. I'm still learning this delegation technique. But your culture, the essence of your business, right? I think that is you and that's the tone. So I don't know. I would never be comfortable. Like when I've tried to hire managers in certain roles, I I keep that part to me so I can make sure that the culture is always at the expectations I would want within the company. I think there's a few things you need to keep control of, and it's that and your presence and that core essence of the business. Like why did you go into that? Don't lose that.
Hmm.
But
And
I'm
what about
curious, you, Scott, talk to every salon and see them all. I would be curious what your like top two or three things a salon owner should never offload.
well, I would say uh, it's it's tricky because uh, when it comes to delegation, there's two aspects. Some people feel like, okay, let's say finances, for example. A lot of salon owners are less comfortable with the financial side of the business, and therefore they want to delegate that to someone, whether a bookkeeper or accountant, whoever the case may be. And that's okay to be doing the actual logistical work, but you cannot take your eyes off of the finances and make sure that you have a core understanding of the principles.
Mhm.
That's an important variation. Same thing when I say with marketing. Yes, it's absolutely in your best interest to delegate, and have your marketing handled by someone who has expertise there. But you can't just blindly never look at it, because it still is representing the image of your company, the brand
Yes,
message, which ties back a little bit to the culture that you talked about. It's the culture and brand message that you want out there to the consumer. So you can't just completely let it go. Social media, a lot of salon owners are not that comfortable with social media, and they offload that. That's fine, but you still need to kind of have a sense of what the top line strategy, or at least
yes,
be involved in that, so that you can evaluate whether what's happening is actually good or bad for your business. You can't just pass it off blindly and wipe your hands clean and say, oh, okay, great, I've got somebody taking care of our social media for us,
agreed.
and carry on. That's where I find that a lot of the mistakes happen in delegation. So how have you experienced that, I guess, in your own journey, and how have you dealt with those things?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Really, on any category you delegate, you still have to be involved. I found some things I completely let go of, like certain stock orderings, and I found that it almost removed me too far. It was nice to not have to worry about the things, but then I lost a bit of touch with that aspect of the business. And so learning, like you said, to not, I mean, you hire the people, but you still be involved. So like I have a social media team for the salon because I also have my own personal brand and it's a lot. And so the salon one, we meet once a week and just kind of touch base, a quick 30-minute meeting, and that works really well for us. And I feel involved. I'm still like kind of the creative main soul of the brand and helping guide that. But, it's not just like, yeah, you have to be in touch with every piece.
Yeah. But there's a difference there. Like you don't have to do all of it, but you need to learn enough so that you understand, right, the top
Yes.
line components. So whether it's the finances, you need to learn enough so that you understand, how to look at the financials and
Hmm.
be able to make smart decisions about them. But you don't have to do all of the, you know, uh, bookkeeping work and the kind of the receipts and doing all the reports. You need somebody to do that and then show you the final report so that you can look at it from a strategy standpoint. Same thing on the
Yes.
marketing side, same thing on the inventory. You mentioned that inventory is a pretty important cost in your overall budget. So if you don't have an eye on it, I'm not saying that you have to be in the back room counting the boxes, but you have to be definitely overseeing,
Yes.
right, the inventory and the ordering that's happening so that you can at least approve and make sure that it's falling in line with the budget guidelines and structure that you've set up.
Yes.
All right, we're aligned there, and I think that's something that a big area that people can learn from is that it's a form of delegation without taking away your overall sort of accountability and responsibility to that overall task.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Keeping your hands a little bit in the pot still so you know what's going on.
Yeah. All right, Lyndsay. I'm going to kind of open it up a little bit. Are there any particular strategies or concrete things that you feel that people should be doing that we haven't talked about yet when making that transition on just how to make that shift? What are some of the first things that they should be doing? Um, any concrete tips that you felt were kind of key learnings for you uh, going through that transition?
Gosh, there's so many learnings. I think one I've been better at just in the last year or two that I wish I had started from the beginning is blocking my calendar, really blocking it. I think it's easy as an owner to just kind of put out fires just like you're just almost in survival mode. And I changed my paradigm on that. So now I have like dedicated blocks for leadership meetings, one-on-ones, social media. I have it really tightly blocked, and I still like to do hair, and I don't want to take that away from myself. So I have two little windows. I allow myself to do that. Um, and having very tight control of my calendar now has given me, I feel like I'm such a better leader. I'm way more present. I can do a podcast like this and I'm not feeling frantic, because I have blocks saved for all these different things. And I wish I had started doing that sooner.
Well, how do you start making, because as we talked about, when you first open the salon, you're the one that has the clients, you're the one that has to be driving the business as you're getting some new
Yeah.
staff kind of up to speed. So most people in the early stages are like, Lyndsay, I don't have a 1 second to even take care of my kids or my family,
Yeah.
and how am I going to block time off for all these different meetings and whatnot? So obviously there's a transition. How do you start making that transition in timing to be able to move away, maybe a little bit less from being behind the chair to being able to focus on the business rather than working in the business?
Yes. So really you need to know where your goal is with that. And I think if in hindsight, if you were starting right now, I would say block 1 day a week that is just business. And whether that means you have to take a day from behind the chair to do that, or you need to work an extra day that week, that day, you need a day blocked to manage the business side of it. In the end, as you grow, you're going to need much more time than that. But having that, like, absolutely no negotiable, have that day blocked out to handle all the things will be the baby steps. And then as you can, and as you've trained people who can take your clientele, that's the goal, or at least mine, it will open up more space for you. And if, you know, you raise your prices and you get them to a point that covers the cost of you running the business, right? So, yes, I still want to do hair, but it has to make sense financially. And so making sure that your prices account for that.
Hmm. Talk to us quickly, because it's not necessarily about the transition, but it's about offloading some of your clients to some of the newbies. Often you can use pricing to help do that. If you raise your price and your client is, maybe not as comfortable moving
Yes.
with you at that new price, that's when you can, potentially transition them to one of your employees
Yes.
that might maintain an old price point. Did you have to do that at your in your salon situation?
Yes, that was a strategy that I used, which I learned from I think 901. I really focused, I loved that how they started their business model. And so, you know, it's demand, right? Like my root retouches are not worth what I charge for them, but it's my demand. And that's so as you raise your prices and you can give them to your apprentice and you know, especially if you are having an assistant, your clients know these people. And so creating that like that culture within in your head, knowing that I'm hoping I'm going to put Susan with Katie someday and creating that relationship early. So when you do have a price increase, you can be like, hey, I love doing your hair. I'm running out of time. And so my prices are raising, but Katie would love to take you at the old rate or whatever her rate is. And I think, and then what the problem is sometimes you'll raise the prices and they'll still stay, right? Like they just want you. But I do think it's an effective method to lower your schedule and give them the opportunities to these people that will do great.
Yeah. And the ones that really do want to keep working with you, well, okay, but they're paying more. So at
They're
least
paying more.
financially, it's making more sense for you to, to put your time towards that. You're going to,
Yes.
be able to build the money there. Let's talk about another challenge that often happens with salon owners as they're making this transition, because they have been an employee in a salon with other people around and they've been buddy buddy and friends, and now all of a sudden you're the boss and you're hiring staff, but your personality, your mentality is still to be super friendly, and this is a very common
Yeah.
situation that happens, where you still want to be friendly with everybody because you want to have a nice culture. How would you say, I don't know if you experienced that personally in your transition, you can speak to it if you have, or at the very least talk about how a salon owner needs to deal with being friendly yet still being the boss and the coach and the manager. How do you deal with that dynamic?
Gosh, this is such a struggle. And I feel like this is my karmic lesson in this chapter. Um, you know, the people I brought in when I first started, some of them were dear friends and that I now I don't even talk to. I think it's that fine line of being friendly, but also this is business. And if they're not in line with your business practice and ethics and model, they have to go. And you might lose some friends in that process. And it's an unfortunate part of it. And I think it's really easy and it is so painful, especially as like an empathetic female that loves connection. I quickly become such tight connections with my team. I have in the past. And in the end of the day, you're just a paycheck to them. They're not truly, they can never truly be your friend because there's a power differential there, right? And so that was one of the hardest things for me to learn emotionally was to be me and be happy and give opportunity and give kindness, but to not go too deep. Like not if they need help, you're at their house, like moving them out of a toxic relationship, going too far. So I've become a lot more guarded in the year as I've grown, hopefully. And I'll have like I had a like my Vancouver team is all pretty new, so I got to more like practice this with them. And I think they would attest to that we're not best friends, but we are great sister wives.
Hmm, that's a great way of putting it. Do you feel like it's important to have a conversation about this, so that it's not just evolving, by your interaction, but do you actually address it sort of one-on-one with somebody who, used to be maybe like, great friends of yours, and to have that conversation to just kind of get it out in the open as to, almost setting some of the boundaries around the relationship? Is that important?
It's very important. I haven't been very successful at that. A few years back, hired really close friend, and even though we had laid all the foundation of expectations, it didn't work out. And I would really, I wouldn't recommend hiring friends or family because it's just so hard. You can't like go to a power dynamic from that. My very best friend since I was four, she was a manager for me for a bit, and it was really stressful, right? And you lose kind of that friendship component because now you're work and everything becomes more about work. So I would really say, even though it sounds so fun to work with your best friends or open a salon with your best friend, don't do it. Like it doesn't usually turn out super well. It can, but it's going to take a very mature relationship that has great communication to withstand it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the last thing you said, great communication is the key, because there's a lot of risk of damaging, really important relationships, whether it's your best friend or a family member. But when
Mhm.
you go into business and you mix business with personal, there's a risk that the relationship, goes sour, and you have to ask yourself up front and have the conversation. Don't just ask yourself and make assumptions. Oh, it's going to be fine. You know what? We've been friends forever and we can get through this.
Yeah.
You have to have the conversations. You have to have open communication, and almost, and do lots of check-ins on a regular basis, because
Yes.
at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of life, probably that friendship, that relationship is going to be more important and more valuable to keep than the
Yes.
business relationship, because you could find somebody else to help manage the business relationship. So um, I would just really harp on your point there to ensure that there's a lot of communication around it. I think there could be a lot of value when you have
Yes.
somebody, that's that close to you, because they're going to put in probably extra energy and effort to want to make it work, because
Yes.
they have that. They're not just there for a paycheck, they're there for a little bit more.
Yes.
um,
I
but
agree.
but there's certainly, a risk to damaging a really beautiful friendship or relationship that you need to be cautious of at the same time. So
Yeah, absolutely.
well said. All right, Lyndsay, let's sort of try to wrap things together. You've had so many, great insights. You've shared a lot of your personal experiences, the things that were, a little more struggle for you, and things that obviously came a little bit more natural to you. And that's the reality. Everybody has their natural strengths and their natural weaknesses. I think one of the things that you talked about earlier is the things that you are a little bit weaker at is maybe the places to look for delegation opportunities first. But as we talked about, you don't want to leave yourself completely blind to those things.
Yes.
Looking back to everything that we've talked about, if I could ask you one final question in terms of what's your one piece of advice, if you could give one piece of advice to salon owners who are struggling today, they've made the transition, but they are struggling. They're already there. What would your one piece of advice be to those owners today to kind of help them get maybe unstuck and beyond themselves?
I mean, in every avenue of life ever is to not give up. Everything is figure outable. And to remember that that crisis moment where you're like, why did I do this? I messed up, is that moment where growth happens, right? That's when you're going to take one of these tidbits you got today and implement it and just push that risk a little bit further.
Mm. I like that. Everything is figure outable.
Mhm.
And what you mentioned earlier for your own, you never fail. You're just learning. So either you're winning or you're learning,
Or
but
you're learning.
you're not losing.
Lots of learning.
You're not failing, and make sure that you capture those learnings and use it to propel you forward. Let's shift gears and think about a service provider today who's working as a employee somewhere, who has dreams and vision of opening their own salon. What would be your one piece of advice to them who are considering leaving to open a salon before they go and do it?
Gosh, I mean, I'm a big believer in writing things down. So when you have that dream, that vision, whatever it is, write it down and put down your why. Why do you want to do this? Because I've seen people open salons because they want to control their playlist, right? It's just for a vibe. And then but find your why. Why do you actually want to do this? Because you you're going to be put through so much in this process. And so making sure that you are prepared for that portion and then do it. Like just go do it. But make sure you're doing it for the correct reasons. That
Mm,
you want to be a leader, you want to take on these things because it's just going to be superstar you doing hair anymore.
yeah, that's really important. A lot of people, I think, do get into it for the wrong reasons. And if you recognize that you're building a business and you're growing a team and you're passionate about that, you're way more likely to have success than you just think you're great and your book is full. And you know what? Why am I here giving half the commission back to this salon owner? I might as well go and open my own salon. Like that is the wrong recipe, because it never ever works out the way that you think. I'll also
And
add,
the numbers, the finance of it, I think there's such a misconception. Like I think the average salon only gets 8% profit. So
no,
think of the like
yeah,
80 hours a week you're working for 8% profit. I don't think people, I think they see their like 50% commission going away and they just think that's all profit. And so you really got to look at the numbers before you do it.
yeah. And that's actually high. Like they say, 80% of salons are essentially just like break even, essentially.
Yeah.
So the business itself is not making money. The salon owner is making money because they're still working behind the chair, so they're getting the money from their clients. But that's what they would be getting if they were just a stylist in someone else's salon. So do you really want to be going through all the pain, all the headaches, all the sleepless nights, and you've just essentially you know you've bought yourself a job,
Yeah.
and you already had a job without all the headaches to work with?
Yep. Yes.
My piece of advice for people who are thinking about going out there is just remember that success leaves clues, meaning there's other people out there that have already gone down this path. Some of them have succeeded, some of them have not. You better go and talk to people who have already gone down the path and
Yes.
who have had success, and really listen and learn. There's a Chinese proverb that I can't remember, the exact sort of saying, but it's essentially, the the person who knows best is the one who's like, just walking back from the destination.
Yes.
So ask that person who's just been down the road and coming back, and don't be shy to make those connections and ask people who have been successful to learn before you make those decisions. It can save you a lot of headaches, and sometimes you'll realize that it's not meant for you, and that's way better to figure out before you go too far down the road.
Absolutely. It's wonderful advice.
Yeah. Lyndsay, thank you so much for taking the time to share and be vulnerable about your journey and some of the struggles that you've been through. I know that you also now, beyond being a salon owner, you also provide a lot of education as well. Where can people connect with you if they want to find out a little bit more, either about maybe asking you questions about your journey, or finding out about the education that you provide? How can they find out more about you?
I'm on all socials as Lyndsay Maderis. Or you can go to lyndsaymaderis.com. I do offer one-on-one coaching. I can tailor if you want business or if you want to learn about extensions. Um, I love to help. And so whether it's a silly TikTok or, a deep dive coach, I'm here.
Amazing. Well, we're gonna have all links to that in the show notes for everybody to be able to check out. Definitely great to follow Lyndsay Maderis. We want to bring her on the show today because of her successful journey as just a real example of a typical person. We didn't want to come in here and, bring you somebody who owns 50 salons and, comes from a corporate background. That's not the reality of most people out there. We wanted to make sure that, we could be in touch with people who would really hear the message. So Lyndsay, thank you so much for coming and sharing today.
Thank you so much. And good luck to everyone listening. You've got this.
Absolutely. Share this episode. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today's conversation for me is that growing a salon and growing as a salon owner is not always the same thing. Right? At some point, every owner faces a choice to either continue being the center of the business themselves or begin building a business that can thrive beyond them. Mm-hmm. That's such an important shift to get to. That transition isn't easy, right? It requires a lot of new skills. It requires a lot of uncomfortable decisions, and sometimes letting go of the version of yourself that got you to where you were when you first decided to open the salon. But as Lyndsay has shared, it's also where some of the greatest opportunities lie for you to have some freedom in your schedule, to actually be able to make an impact on other people's lives, right? And having a long-term success really kickstart. If this episode resonated with you, I'd encourage you to take a moment and honestly ask yourself, am I building a career, right, which is personal, or am I building a brand, right, which is long-term and sustainable? And if you know of another salon owner out there who might be navigating this journey, maybe struggling, or you know of somebody who's considering leaving to go and open their own salon, please share this episode with them. Chances are they're sharing and experiencing some of the exact same challenges that Lyndsay and I, discussed today, and could benefit from this. Thanks so much for listening to everybody. That's the scoop for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Salon Scoop podcast. This show is produced by Salon S.O.S, a digital marketing agency by industry professionals for industry professionals. If you want simple and affordable solutions for any of your salon marketing needs, such as websites, client loyalty, Google search rankings, social media, or more, come visit us at salonsos.ca or on Instagram at salon.s.o.s. If you want to hear more episodes like this and help us continue to bring the industry great content, it would mean so much to us if you would support us in one of the following ways. Either share this episode with one other industry professional, and rate the show on Spotify, or write us a quick review on Apple Music. We want to hear your feedback. If you have follow-up questions or ideas for future episodes, please reach out. DM us on Instagram at salonus.s.o.s, or hit us up on our website again at salonsos.ca. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go get your hustle on, keep smiling, and we'll catch you on our next episode.